The once vibrant town of Elmwood had transformed into a haunting, desolate wasteland. Streets, once filled with the laughter of children and the chatter of neighbors, now lay empty and forlorn. The houses that had once been homes were now boarded up, their windows like vacant eyes staring into the abyss. Elmwood had become a town forgotten by time, a place where the very essence of life had been drained away. The giant mosquito, a monstrous abomination of nature, had left its indelible mark on Elmwood. Its colossal wings, like dark omens, cast long shadows over the desolation it had wrought. The once lush trees, which had provided shade and shelter, stood as skeletal sentinels, their leafless branches reaching out like bony fingers toward the ashen sky. The grass, once a vibrant carpet of green, had withered and turned brown, as if mourning the loss of life. The flowers, which had once painted Elmwood in a riot of colors, now drooped with petals like wilted dreams. Nature itself seemed to grieve for the town's demise, as if it recognized the profound wrongness that had befallen this once thriving community. The livestock that had once grazed in the meadows had succumbed to weakness and sickness, their feeble forms serving as a grim testament to the mosquito's insatiable thirst for blood. The remaining survivors, those who had witnessed the horror firsthand, had become little more than walking specters, their faces pallid and their eyes haunted by the memory of that dreadful day. Among them, Sarah had become a symbol of hopelessness. She had been a young woman full of life, her dreams and aspirations stretching out before her like an endless horizon. But the encounter with the mosquito had transformed her into something unrecognizable, a victim, a predator, and ultimately, a harbinger of death. As Sarah's life force had been drained away, the mosquito had left its mark upon her. Her once lustrous hair had turned ashen gray, her skin had become parchment-like, and her eyes had grown distant and vacant. She wandered the deserted streets of Elmwood like a phantom, a spectral reminder of the town's tragic fate. It was in this eerie silence that Sarah had her first encounter with one of the mosquito's victims. The figure emerged from the shadows, its emaciated form swaying unsteadily. Its skin clung tightly to its bones, like a shroud, and its eyes were empty sockets, devoid of life. Sarah's heart raced as she recognized the figure. It was one of the townspeople who had suffered the same gruesome fate as Mrs. Hargrove. But somehow, it still lived, or rather, existed. The figure, driven by an insatiable hunger, staggered toward Sarah, its skeletal arms outstretched. Sarah's scream pierced the air as she tried to flee, but the figure's unnatural speed defied logic. Its bony fingers closed around her arm, pulling her into its ghastly embrace. Sarah felt the figure's jagged teeth puncture her flesh, and an overwhelming sense of dread washed over her as she realized her fate. The creature was a grotesque reflection of the mosquito itself, a being drained of life and transformed into a harbinger of death. As the figure drained the life from Sarah, she felt her strength wane, her vision blur, and her consciousness slip away. The figure dropped her lifeless body to the ground and shuffled away, its hunger momentarily sated. Sarah had become the mosquito mummy's first victim among the survivors, a chilling reminder that death's grip extended far beyond the initial attack. The town of Elmwood was now haunted not only by the memory of the giant mosquito but also by the nightmarish existence of those it had claimed. The mosquito mummy continued its relentless search for victims, stalking the lifeless streets of Elmwood with a predatory determination. Its pallid skin clung tightly to its skeletal frame, and its empty eye sockets seemed to scan the town for any remaining signs of life. The atmosphere of Elmwood had become a chilling testament to the horrors that had transpired. The once thriving community was now a ghost town, a place where the living dared not tread, and where the shadows whispered secrets of despair. The mosquito mummy, with its gaping maw and razor-sharp teeth, had become the embodiment of death itself. It struck with ruthless efficiency, its bite a quick and painless end to its victims, but the sheer terror of witnessing such an attack was enough to haunt the survivors' nightmares. Despite the town's desolation, the mosquito mummy's hunger remained insatiable. It knew that it was only a matter of time before it found new victims, new sources of sustenance to prolong its ghastly existence. Elmwood had become a place where life and death danced a macabre waltz, and the survivors, those who still clung to the fragile threads of existence, knew that their time in this nightmarish purgatory was far from over. In the bleak aftermath of the Mosquito mummy's relentless onslaught, Elmwood had transformed into a harrowing landscape, where the boundaries between life and death had blurred into a chillingly surreal nightmare. The few survivors who remained wandered the desolate streets like spectral remnants of a bygone era, their gaunt faces etched with despair. It wasn't long before these survivors realized that they could not linger in this cursed town any longer. They knew that if they didn't leave, they would inevitably fall victim to the insatiable Mosquito mummy. Gathering their meager belongings, they made the heart-wrenching decision to abandon their homes, their memories, and the once beloved Elmwood that had become a forsaken place. Their exodus marked a sorrowful procession, a silent march away from the relentless grip of death that still clung to the town. With each step, they left behind the ashen remnants of their lives, their footprints fading like ghosts in the dusty streets. The Mosquito mummy watched them go, its empty eye sockets filled with a hunger that transcended the boundaries of life and death. It understood that its time in Elmwood was a cycle, a recurring nightmare from which it could not escape. And so, it bided its time, knowing that the town would one day beckon new victims into its chilling embrace. As Elmwood faded into the distance, the survivors carried with them the indelible scars of their ordeal. The memory of the giant mosquito and the Mosquito mummy would haunt their dreams, a constant reminder that evil could take on the most grotesque and unnatural forms. But Elmwood's chilling tale did not end with the departure of its beleaguered inhabitants. The town's name became a whispered legend, a cautionary tale shared among travelers and a reminder that even the most picturesque places could conceal unimaginable horrors. The survivors sought refuge in new towns, their stories met with skepticism and disbelief. They were haunted by the memory of those who had succumbed to the Mosquito mummy's deadly embrace, and they could not escape the weight of their guilt for having abandoned their friends and neighbors. Yet, even as they attempted to rebuild their lives, the survivors remained vigilant, knowing that the Mosquito mummy was not confined to Elmwood alone. Its insatiable thirst for blood and its relentless pursuit of victims transcended the boundaries of any single town. The Mosquito mummy's malevolent presence lingered like a shadow in their minds, a constant reminder that they could never truly escape the horrors of their past. They knew that the nightmare they had witnessed in Elmwood would forever be etched into their souls, a chilling legacy that would haunt them until the end of their days. And so, the survivors carried with them the knowledge that evil could take on many forms, that the line between life and death was fragile and porous, and that the horrors they had faced in Elmwood were but a glimpse into the abyss that lurked in the darkest corners of existence. Elmwood, once a haven of tranquility and simplicity, had become a chilling testament to the fragility of life and the darkness that could descend upon even the most idyllic of places. Its streets, now devoid of laughter and warmth, stood as a grim reminder that evil could take root in the most unexpected of settings, waiting patiently for its next opportunity to strike.